Hello, everybody, and welcome to 2021 and the Sapphire Nation podcast. I'm Sapphire Ed, North American PR representative for Sapphire Technology, as well as their gaming evangelist. And normally we have a guest, and that makes it really easy for me to do the next hour. But we didn't get a guest this month. Everybody's busy. CES occupied people. I don't know why that would occupy people, but it did. So what I told everyone was, let's do an AMA today. We're going to let you guys ask questions. We're going to discuss topics you present, and we've already got some of that lined up. So let's head in here. The first question we got earlier this week when we announced we were doing this was from DJ Asathma. Okay. And DJ asked a question. I'm going to focus on the one question he asked. How does Sapphire decide on the clocks of their GPU compared to the competition? Because I think that is a great question. All right, so let's talk about that for a minute. When we design a graphics card, there's a balancing act that takes place. And the balancing act is looking at performance to cooling to noise to price. And you've got to find a way to get those to all balance out, because you can get great performance, great cooling, but it may be noisy and cost too much. Or maybe you can get great cooling and great noise levels, but maybe the performance suffers a little bit. Or you can get great price and the other three just suck. I mean, I'm sorry, but sometimes it happens that way. So when you look at stuff like this, there's always a balancing act going on. I've talked about this in a number of other podcasts and interviews I've done. When it comes to looking at a GPU, on the whole, I don't recommend the actual clock speeds be even worthy of consideration. The performance difference between a reference graphics card and a good overclocked from the factory graphics card is usually in a single digit area. It's really a minor performance boost. What's more important than the clock speed is to look at the quality of the cooler, the quality of the build, the silence of operations. All of these come together to be quality of life features. You want to give you a good gaming experience. And a good gaming experience isn't always translated into by having a higher clock speed. So don't get too caught up in the clock speeds. Focus on the other factors, which is what we have done in the past and hopefully will continue to do in the future. We focus on how do we make the value card experience for the consumer. That tends to be our focus with doing this. Thumper sent a lovely note. He's wondering what's going on with the shortages and will we possibly be seeing new stock in the next few months? And this goes along with a note from Breaking Dime asking if there is a chance we can give you guys a little notice that the new cards are getting ready to go live. I just did this fairly in depth on Tom's Hardware, but let's do it again. Let's talk about it again for you guys that haven't seen the video yet. 2020 was a perfect storm to disrupt the PC game. So you have to go back and look at what happened and really take each individual piece and understand how they combine. So early in the year, we get hit with COVID. And yes, I know you're going to say he's going to blame COVID. COVID is at fault indirectly across a huge area. So COVID caused all of the major factories in Asia to shut down. They just closed them. Now, this wasn't just factories that's making silicon. This is factories that's making PCBs. This is factories that's making etching material. This is capacitors, diodes, everything shut down. The entire infrastructure of technology development was shut down for a couple of months. We live in the general community with an illusion that this could have just been a switch flipped and it was turned back on. And that's not the case. These factories needed 3-4 months sometimes to come back to even 75-80% production levels. And while that sounds like, okay, it should start to get better, remember, they've got all the back orders over those months closed and the time of ramping up. So they're really behind the eight ball out of the gate coming out of this. So you've got the fact that the infrastructure just made it next to impossible to get the production levels to what they should have been. Next, you hit the issue with shipping. International shipping had a number of limits, and I'm not sure if they're still in place today. And if anybody knows, please post in the comments. Had a number of limits imposed on them during the early months of the crisis. And those limits required 50 to 60% of all capacity in shipping, air, ship, boat, whatever. It didn't matter. All capacity of shipping had to be limited to just medical equipment, medical supplies. Now, that still left space for other things to be transported, but it's half the capacity. And remember, it's not just one or two companies trying to ship things, it's everybody got limited to half the capacity. This resulted in a massive increase in pricing for shipping and delays because you couldn't move the quantity that you were used to moving. Again, now these two factors combine and you begin to see the problems that were coming with the supply chain. If this had been the limit of the issues, we would be starting to see a recovery, but this was just the beginning. AMD actually suffered in the supply chain because of their success. The reason I say that is everything AMD makes is on a 7 nanometer process. The processors, the EPYC line and the Ryzen line, the GPUs, the custom chips that are being made for consoles. All of this is being made on the 7 nanometer process, and there's only so much 7 nanometer production capability in the world, and they're not the only customer. So factory limitations and everything else begin to come into play, and all of this is building. Do you see where we're going yet? Now, you hit 2020, and a big shift in the market took place. Coming into 2020, if COVID hadn't have hit, I would still say that the majority of home users for computers would not be using actual computers. They'd be using consoles, tablets, not consoles, but tablets and phones, and maybe small laptops in a few occasions. And the reason for this was nobody was working from home. They didn't need a computer at home. Now they're all at home, and suddenly they have realized that these tablets and these cell phones that they thought were going to be incredible devices are supplements to a real computer. So the demand for computing in general began to rise drastically, not in little ways, but a drastic rise, like a tsunami wave came in. So this is rising, and PC gaming is rising on top of it because people are discovering that PC gaming is a wonderful form of entertainment. Look at the numbers coming out right now. Gaming as a whole has generated more revenue than television and movie combined. And PC gaming has generated more revenue than either movie, television, or music. Now, not combined, but any one of those individually. PC gaming has seen a rapid growth. So, short supplies, limited availability to produce, hard to get stuff shipped to, demand is going through the roof. All right, it would still not be a complete disaster until you add, yes, ladies and gentlemen, your and mine favorite greatest hits from the past, mining. GPU mining has once again become profitable. And so miners are snapping up products as fast as they can get them. And this further disrupts the availability to the PC gaming market. All of this is combining to just make it a nightmare to get these products. And then we actually get, and Luke, I was about to say that, then we finally get the last group that added to this, the scalpers. These people that buy a graphics card for $700 and sell it for $1,500 to $2,000. Okay, they're snapping up these cards. So you've got this huge storm of availability issues that hit that no one can control, no one could predict. And the end result is we have what you see today. You just have no availability. Now, the question becomes, now, well, you've got limited availability. It's getting out there. It's slowly the stuff is moving through, but it's difficult to often get the things you want. So what does this mean for consumers going through Q1? A lot of people felt like there was going to be a tick of the clock to 2021 and everything was going to get better. I'm sorry, folks. Everything is the same now as it was 2 to 3 months ago in the totality of the things going on in the world. There has not been a drastic change yet. Availability will gradually get better. Toward the end of Q1, I think we might begin to see some better availability into Q2. But that's going to depend on a lot of other factors. That's going to depend if COVID doesn't spike and we have to close down factories again, if shipping can become more reasonable in price point, if the mining craze doesn't keep exploding. There's a lot of factors involved in this. So there's no way to give a good prediction. And anybody that tries to give you a good prediction of this is blowing smoke up your butt. Okay. The truth is, this perfect storm hit, it caught everybody off guard, and there was no way to prepare for it and no quick recovery for it. I know that might not be the answer you guys want for this, but that's the reality that we're going to face. Luke, I'm really thinking Q2, but again, I'm kind of making a prediction there. Now, Breaking Dimes had asked about, can we give you guys an update when we're going to put out a card? Here's the problem with that, Breaking Dimes, because I would love to do that for you. The problem is we don't post the cards. Sapphire does not sell directly to consumers. Sapphire sells to retailers. So we sell to Amazon, we sell to Newegg, we sell to various distribution companies around the country in North America. And it's the same all over the world, but I know the North America stuff. And they then post the products, which creates some of the other mess that we're having right now. I don't know when they're going to post them. They don't tell us when they're going to post them. And because they don't tell us, we can't give you guys a head start. I wish we could. I think it would be awesome if we could. And Breaking Dimes decided to sneak that in the back door instead of posting that in the questions. Aha, very funny. He's asking me what the MSRP is. I'm going to answer this with an answer that none of you are going to like, but it's just the reality, so forgive me. MSRP is a meaningless number right now. And what I mean by that is this. I could tell you the MSRP is anything. I could give you a low number and you wouldn't know the difference. And the reason why you won't know the difference is demand is so high and scalpers have so butchered the price point that MSRP at this point becomes a meaningless number. So to be honest, I don't even at this point know what the supposed MSRP is supposed to be. And we don't know yet what the impact of the new tariffs, which, by the way, is going to add to this mess, what the new tariffs are going to have. Right now, it feels like the world of computer hardware is sitting on its hands, kind of waiting. I think they're all waiting to see what's going to happen with the tariffs. Are we going to get them instantly removed? Are we going to have to live with them a while? What's going to happen? That's something we're going to have to see down the road. But MSRP as a whole, between me and you, it's right now in the current is a completely meaningless number. It has no purpose. It has no value because tariffs might change it. Availability at the reseller end changes what the pricing is they're going to ask for. Scalpers change what the value is. There is no set answer. If you want to deal with scalpers, there is actually a way we can, as a community, deal with scalpers. And I've said this from day one, don't buy from them. A lot of these guys have gone out and purchased 5, 10, 15 cards, and they're sitting on them trying to sell them at a stupidly inflated price. Mark down the resellers, and don't give them the price. Don't buy from them, ever. make them have to sell those cards at a loss. If they have to sell the cards at a loss, sooner or later, they're just going to stop the scalping. That's the only way we can stop scalpers. I wish we had better options, but that's the only way currently that we can, as a community, stop scalpers. Let's see here. Continuing on down. Bots are brutal. Talk to Amazon and Newegg. Tell them that they need to put CAPTCHA software into place. Tell them they need to limit sales. Tell them they need to take the steps necessary to stop the bots. Oh, wait. Consumers have been begging them to do that. AMD has begged them to do that. They still haven't done that. I don't know what to tell you. It's what we have to deal with. District. Well, hold on. I'm going to go down to Lone Survivor because Districts is a little more involved. Let me see here. I want to see some of the others. I'm trying to keep caught up. So Lone Survivor asks, what are the requirements Sapphire looks for in making a toxic lineup or card? Toxic is over the top. Toxic is crazy. Toxic is the highest clock speeds you can achieve. Toxic is a cooling system that just is insane. You can get frostbite running your card at full speed. Toxic is everything cranked up a notch. And the reason that you don't see a toxic lineup consistently, and we look every generation, we look at making toxic. The reason you don't see it is we have to look at what we can achieve to put it over the top, to make it so outrageous that it's the best of the best of the best, sir. See if anybody gets that quote. And to make it that outrageous, but we got to be able to bring it at a price point that people are going to be willing to pay. And that's difficult because the more outrageous you make a product, the more over the top you take a product, the more expensive you make it. And at some point, the expense isn't worth it to some people. There are some that want to buy it. It's a Halo product. But when we look at toxic, and like I said, we look at every generation, and sometimes we think we can do it, and sometimes we think we can't. The last few generations, there hasn't been anything to indicate to us that a real toxic card could sell well enough to justify the time and development and the cost. So you never know. You never know. We're looking every new generation. So don't give up hope. Toxic will eventually be back. Maybe just not as soon as we'd all like to see it. District ask. This is a long one. Synthetic benchmarks versus real-world benchmarks versus real-world computing use and actual expectations. I invite you to go over. Hardware Unboxed just did an amazing video on a comparison of a 3600, a 5600X, and the Intel 10400. And he literally answered this question, but I'm going to go ahead and take a stab at it anyway. Synthetic benchmarks are really good to show you the potential power difference in use between two products. It gives you a potential best case scenario performance difference. Now, best case scenario performance difference in a clinically controlled, contrived, and developed benchmarking piece of software is not the same thing as what happens in the real world. The real world doesn't work. So let's go to real world benchmarks. Let's go to where people look at benchmarks in video games and get their benchmarks from there. The problem with benchmarking in video games from a reviewer perspective as a consumer is that benchmarking in video games seldom shows, again, a realistic environment. Most of these video game company or benchmarks, what they do is this. First, they get an over-the-top microprocessor if they're going to look at a GPU, because they don't want the GPU to be bottlenecked by the CPU. Now, this is super overclocked, usually the highest end they can get. Next, they set maximum detail levels and throw it in. Well, that's not how gamers do stuff. Gamers will often have to have bought a less powerful CPU. Or maybe they've got a lesser GPU and they know it and they run the settings toned down. The real world computing or a real world benchmarking system, as it were, still maintains some of the fallacies that's created by a synthetic benchmark. There is a level of clinicality to the way the benchmarks are done. You have a computer that is clean of extra software. You don't have Discord in the background. Maybe you don't have OBS and you run OBS in the background. You don't have the applications that a typical user has running in the background of the PC. They run it as clean as possible. They run a setting level that most gamers aren't going to run. They run a CPU that the majority of gamers aren't going to run when it comes to talking about GPU benchmarks. So the end result is the numbers give, again, potential, but they don't give the reality. Now, what I liked about what they just did at Hardware Unboxed is, and if you go watch the video, you'll see this, take a serious look, forget what they say, look at the charts. So they were looking at a 3600, 5600X, and 10400K. Now, all the benchmarks, all the synthetic benchmarks tell you the 5600X is going to destroy a 3600X. It's going to have a really high percentage difference. But at what point does a difference that make no difference really matter? A number of tests they showed the 1% lows, which are, in my opinion, a much more important number than the average frame rate. The 1% lows were usually really close, and in most cases, well over 60 frames a second. What that meant is, in almost all of their testing, everything was going to be smooth. And when they moved to 1440p, oh dear God, the differences vanished. At the end of the day, it's difficult to talk to people in many communities. You guys are an exception. You're awesome for this. You guys understand that there is a difference between a high-end enthusiast user and an everyday user. An everyday user can't afford $1,000 video card. An everyday user can't afford $1,000 microprocessor. They're not putting 64 gigs of RAM into it, running a super ridiculous custom loop with 480 millimeter radiators, then overclocking everything to the moon. They're not doing this. They're buying realistic parts. Right now, 5600X, great chip. 3600 has more ready availability, and the performance difference probably is the better buy. So this is what they're going to tend to gravitate to because they can get it. So they're going to get a 3600, and then they're going to look at chips, and they're going to look at video cards and try to make decisions. And too often there's just too much focus on the benchmarks and not talking to the people that have the experiences. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems we're having in the community today. Back when you had the traditional benchmark sites before the YouTubers, the actual discussions in the forums of those benchmark sites lent valuable data, just incredible data, because these were people that were really using it. And too often the YouTube channels to me seem less focused. So how do we fix this? Well, we fix this, one, by communities like this, where people can come into, they can ask questions. We've got people in here well, District I know personally, and I know his computer knowledge. A few other of you have great computer knowledge. I come in here, bring what I have. NFC Josh Sniffen is in here. Lopez, who I've worked with through different LAN parties, is an extremely knowledgeable person. Shannon Robb is in here often with us, who is an extremely knowledgeable person. Wendell from Level 1 Tech can be reached in here. We've got some amazing here to help you answer these questions and get the answers you need. And you can find this often in some Facebook communities as well. The problem is Facebook communities, you have to wade through the fanboys. You have to wade through the enthusiasts who will tell you, for example, you're wanting to build a new gaming rig, and you'll ask what chip, which CPU should new gaming rig, and basically if you're not buying a 5950X, you're not buying the right chip. And before you think I'm exaggerating, go look at some groups sometime. Um, there'll be huge arguments about that, about the value of that. We just got to educate them by being there for them, to help them through it, to walk them through it. My nephew is building a new gaming rig. By the way, I built his first gaming rig for him. It lasted him 6.5 years. And we didn't buy the highest end stuff. We just bought good quality stuff at reasonable price points to get him up and running in the games he wanted to play. So he's decided that he wants a new gaming system, a little extra money, you know how that goes, and he wants to build a new gaming rig. So he and I sat down and we started looking at parts availability, and the gut reaction was we wanted to get him into an AMD based system. We couldn't. We couldn't because there weren't any 3600s available locally at a reasonable price point. Online, they were getting difficult to find. So we ended up with a 10400, which, by the way, is still going to give him a great gaming system. So this is the stuff you have to do. You have to sit down with people. You have to take the time to talk to them. And they need to understand it's okay to have questions. It's okay to ask for help. When I came up in this, involved in the enthusiast level of PC gaming, there was no place like this. There was nobody like the people in this groups. We didn't have this yet. This hadn't developed yet. And we had to do it all from scratch. I wish I'd have had groups like this back then. This would have been amazing to be able to sit down and talk with people. My best bet to have these kind of communities was there was this one guy who lived about 4 towns over that I would drive over to on a Saturday and have lunch with him, and that was it. There wasn't a constant communication. There wasn't the ability to have this direct interaction. So as far as synthetic versus even real world benchmarks, take a salt. Talk to people that's actually using the products. Find out what they can do. 3600 with a 6800 for a GPU. I am running, in fact, I can look right now and tell you, because Radeon software has this really neat feature. I have played Cyberpunk 2077 for 51, the current driver I have, and my average frame rate is 92 frames per second at 1440p. So, little tweaking, you can find a way to make it wonderful. You can find a way to make it amazing. Let me see here. Not so much limits in place right now. I know that big companies brought up air freight. Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm not sure what the limits are on the shipping, but because of the massive back orders, I think Breaking Dimes is right. I think the actual shipping cost is probably still really high. Let me see here. Nobody was expecting a mining boom so quick. That's true, and caught us all off guard because it just exploded out of nowhere. We didn't see anything that was coming. There was no indication. Breaking Dimes. Okay, I'm not gonna say that because then you'll get questions. But thank you for the information. Now I've got a source. I've actually got a son-in-law that does. I'm in good shape there. Just brought up this question because I get asked it a lot. Yeah, District and I have spent more than one evening sitting around having dinner together and talking about this. Okay, that's important to know. Breaking Down brings up a point. A lot of these companies for ship up on back orders yet. A good friend of mine who lives out in LA was telling me the story right before Christmas. He said he walked out his front door and he looked over at his neighbors and he saw his UPS guy walking away from the neighbors. But he didn't see a UPS truck, and he knew he didn't live in the area. And so he walked over to him and started talking to him. He was explaining to him UPS didn't have enough trucks. He was actually being paid to drive his F-150 around and throw packages in the bed. That's the craziness that took place through the holiday seasons with all of this. Remember, even the shipping out to consumers is under heavy attack right now because people don't get out like they used to. There's more Amazons making a killing right now. Let's be clear. They're just doing really well. Um, just needed to buy the parts, and boom, COVID came. Prices go to the stars, and nothing was done. I'm actually getting ready to build because I'm bored. I'm getting ready to build a replacement system. My current work PC is in a Corsair, what was it, Air 320 or whatever, the MATX version of the Air system, and it's a pretty big build. And I've moved to small form factor for the most part, and so I wanted to downsize, and I have an Antec ISK 110 sitting here. Now, if none of you know what that is, go look it up. It's a tiny little case. It's probably 4 or 5 liters total size. Basically, it'll fit an ITX motherboard, and that's it in the case. There is no room for anything else except maybe an SSD. The power supply is an external brick that delivers to a splitter internally, and then that's the end of it. You're done. Tiny, tiny little case. And I want to move to that for the work rig. And the reason why is my work rig is 90% email, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. I'm running my work rig right now is a Ryzen 1500X. So it's and I've got a graphics card in it. I've got like a 460 or 450 in it. Just a little bitty junky graphics card, just enough to throw things up. I don't need high-end graphics. But I'd like to move to the smaller one because I could give myself back quite a bit of desk space. And I went looking. I was going to use a one of the Ryzen APUs. Dude, you can't find them. The pricing on them is crazy when you do. So I'm actually going to I'm going to do something terrible here. You guys are going to get mad at me. I'm going to use an Intel. I'm getting an Intel i3 10100 because that's all I really need is something basic. But what that lets me do is I can get an ITX motherboard, and I can use the graphics on the chip, reduce the total size to nothing for this thing. It'll actually fit behind my monitor, and I'll never even know it's there. This is the crazy world we live in. You've got to look at what you want to do and buy what's available to you right now. Hopefully you're buying Sapphire, but I understand it's hard to find stuff. It's hard to get the stuff you want. Uh, yeah, you couldn't just text somebody and even get an answer, and there was no such thing as Google. Back in my day, we didn't even have www. We had IP addresses. I used to keep a little. I just reached for it to show it on camera. We're not on camera. I used to keep a little address book full of IP addresses to specific websites that I wanted to be able to go back to. We didn't even have a good bookmarking system back then. That's back when we were using Mosaic for the browser. Um, was there already before the pandemic a resource constraint in making CPUs, GPUs, and chips? Well, yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's always a resource constraint. Remember, like I said, AMD has the problem. Their success has created a bit of an issue for them. There's only so much 7 nanometer process. And with the success of these chips, the ability to produce the same level of mass volume they would have before isn't there. There's only so much available. Now, I don't think it would have been anywhere near the mess we're seeing today. I think you would have had availability. You would have had, maybe you'd have to wait a couple of days for a new restock now and then. But at some point, there still would have been a level of availability constraint going into this before the pandemic. It just wouldn't have been anything like what you're seeing today, and it wouldn't have really slowed down anything. Um, Breaking dimes, you're so sweet. Sapphire makes the most sought after AMD cards, so it's harder than usual. Well, thank you. District just picked up a 5500 XT for $200. Um, glad you got it while you did. consoles are definitely eating stuff up right now. Because the console success, like I said, AMD's success has shown a slight weakness that needs to be taken care of. It will be. I have faith it will be. Again, without the constraints that COVID put on everything, I don't think this would have been as noticed. COVID just really, really went nuts to get the stuff done. Um, here's a fun one for you that I can't believe nobody addresses these kind of questions. Nobody's asking this good stuff. Um, I've had a couple of people in small form factor forums ask me about why I put a fan under my video cards. I'm using NR200 cases. If you don't know what they are, go look them up and get out from under your rock. I use NR200 cases. I'm running the Nitro Plus 6800. I've got two slim 120 millimeter fans underneath that blowing up into the GPU. And I get people that ask me this, and the way they ask it is this. I put the fans in like what you did, but my temperatures aren't any lower. What am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. You're looking at the wrong thing. So in my case, I've got the 6800. All GPUs, Sapphire and everybody else, in their BIOS has a target temperature. That target temperature is what you're trying to get. You up your clock speeds, you up your power, you change your fan speeds, all to stay within that target temperature range. And that temperature range is determined based on how the chip is going to perform, as well as the ability of the cooler to keep it there with reasonable fan noise. That's how that's put together. So in the case of my 6800, even with the two fans underneath it providing great cool air input directly to the card, my card is still hitting about 72 C under really heavy load under an extended period of time. And everybody thinks, well, then what's wrong with your cooler setup? The fans aren't helping. Why do you bother? Because my fans on my card are running at 800 RPM. Think about that for a minute. There is so much airflow coming up from those bottom case fans that they allow my card's fans to not have to run as much, which means no noise. This is why you do it. We've lost that direct intake experience. It used to be, and this is why I love the NR200, because it kind of goes back to the way this used to work. Back in the earlier days of building computers, the case would have a 120 millimeter fan intake on the side. You just see a grill, and when you pull off the side panel, there was like this expanding solo cup thing that was coming out of the side panel. If you looked carefully, that was always positioned. So if expanded down, it would come very close to the CPU cooler. The reason for that was to allow the CPU cooler a very direct flow of cool air to help it cool itself, be more efficient, make the fans run better. It's the same thing with using a system like this. The more direct flow cool air you can give to the product, the cooler it can run, because it can run the fans lower and keep the temperature down and thus keep the noise down. This is why I love the NR200. The NR200 allows you to take a top-down cooler, such as a Noctua, L12S, or a Sky Big Shuriken 3. It lets you take that top-down cooler, which in my opinion is still the most efficient coolers, and I'll explain that in a minute. And by putting a 120 millimeter fan on that side panel, forget the tempered glass, we want cool and cool. By putting a 120 millimeter fan on that side panel, you can raise that cooler 1 to 2 notches in its capability, and it just becomes super efficient. Now, the reason I like top-down coolers are, a traditional cooler works really well in a traditional case design. And I'm talking about a tower cooler, because the air tends to flow front to back or top to bottom. And you can position the cooler so that it's in the path of airflow. And this makes it really efficient. A top-down cooler's problem is, with that case design, the airflow is not in path, it passes over. So the top-down cooler is fighting with exhaust fans and intake fans against the current they create to pull the air into the top-down cooler. But when you get a case that can give you the side input makes all the difference with a top-down cooler. And the advantage of a top-down cooler is it doesn't just cool your CPU, it cools everything on your motherboard. In the case of an ITX B550 build, it's cooling my NVMe drive, it's cooling my RAM, it's cooling my VRMs, it's cooling all of it with direct airflow. And that, to me, is incredible, especially when you're in smaller cases like this. That's why I like these kind of case designs. And then, like I said, you add a couple of bottom intake fans to this thing, and you've got a super silent system. And it's just a great way to build a system. I love building systems in this. People still use the system, the case, haha, he showed there you go. Well, you've got the open airflow. That's the advantage. Well, that's two advantages that open airflow has. The first is open airflow actually doesn't need as many fans. So in theory, it can be quieter. And everything in the open airflow is being provided fresh outside air, which makes it much more efficient. Now, the argument you hear, there's two. Well, the biggest argument you hear is that dust. Dude, you turn off your open airflow case, you grab a can of compressed air, zit, turn it back on, you're back up and running. You didn't have to take off a side panel. You didn't have to pull filters. You didn't have to mess with any of it. And you have none of that airflow restriction that filters and side panels can create. So the result is an open air case tends to be cooler and quieter. And there's actually a big movement, I believe, heading in that direction. Look at the X Proto. I'm seeing X Proto cases everywhere right now. There is a steady movement in small form factor. There's a group that's moving into the open air, open frame design. So the open frame design is really neat. Now, there's another reason that open frame works better. And it's also the reason that sometimes bigger towers work better than smaller towers. It's about the thermal mass. So when you generate heat, you've got to dissipate the heat. All right, so let's think like a pot of water. So you've got a pot of water that's at room temperature. Grab yourself, and a big pot, a couple of gallons of water. Grab yourself a small cup of boiling hot water and pour it in the pot of water. What happens? Well, the boiling water is almost instantly cooled. It begins and it raises the temperature of the whole pot, but it doesn't raise it that much, and it gets rid of the heat because it's able to dissipate it. So what happens is in bigger cases, airflow, believe it or not, is less important. And the reason for that is the thermal mass inside the case. So when the heat arrives inside the case's temperature or air, it doesn't raise the temperature as drastically and as fast because there's more that it has to raise. There's more thermal mass. This is why ITX cases, directed airflow, making it move where you need it to move, is very important. With a bigger case, it's less important. You just kind of blow air into it and blow air out of it, you get it done. With an open air case, your thermal mass is your room or your house. The amount of thermal mass you have is ridiculous. It makes those coolers super efficient. And it makes it really easy to dissipate the heat and move it, and you end up with a quieter system. Joke's on you, my friend, with a first generation i5 and a G710 only has one fan, the CPU fan. Awesome. I like quiet systems. I don't mind a lot of fans. And people will ask me, how do you get a quiet system with a lot of fans? Believe it or not, it's much easier than you think. So I build a system and I get stability in place first. I don't overclock. I don't tweak anything. I want stability first. Once I've got my stability in place, the next thing I do is I set the case fan speeds. I don't use ramped case fans if I'm going to build in a case. I use static case fans. And I set the speed to the highest speed I can set and not hear them. Okay, I don't want to hear the case fans whining all day long. so I get as high as I can set without hearing them. In the case of a good quality case fan, ooh, pun intended, in that instance, you will usually find somewhere between 900 and 1200 RPM is the sweet spot. It depends on the fan, but that usually tends to be the sweet spot where you can get the most air movement without the noise. Now, once I've got that set, I leave the graphics card at stock because, well, Sapphire makes awesome coolers. They're cool, they're quiet, they get the job done. But the CPU fans, what I do is I go in and I know what I want to be able to run for performance. I begin playing with using stuff like Prime 95, and I want to keep the CPU in Prime 95 under 80 degrees centigrade. Now, 80 degrees centigrade sounds like a lot of temp, but remember, Prime 95 is ridiculously hard on a CPU for temperature. So it's not a lot of temp when you get out in the real world. Use Prime 95 to get this. But then what I do is I tweak that fan curve to the slowest I can make the fans go and keep the temperature I wanted. Once I achieve that, you're done. Because if your fans can run decent and fairly quiet and keep ADC, in gaming where you're typically seeing 60 to 70 at the most, you're never going to hear them. It's easy. It just takes a little time to tweak. It can be useful. Luke did this with his other stuff. Looking back up here, making sure I didn't miss anything. Tell you what I think we're gonna do, because I don't see anybody else in here that's gonna make a comment. Earlier, right before we started the show, I was talking to everybody. I've got a 5500 XT that was used for review samples. It's not being used for anything now, and so I want to give it away. And the most of the people in here commented to that. Some of you didn't, but that's okay. I'm limited to the continental United States, and it turns out we have a community member in here. The poor guy is still running a, what was he said he was running? I gotta scroll up and look for it. He's still running a 7870. So what I think we're going to do is this. Lord Quack, I want you to send me a PM with your shipping information, and I'm going to try to Monday get you that 5500 XT on its way. Just as a way to say thank you for joining the community, being active in the community, and joining the live stream. I appreciate it. We want you guys to be engaged in this. The purpose of Sapphire Nation is not just to sell you graphics cards, but it's to create a community that gives us feedback, lets us know where we can be better. We let you know where we're doing things, and we appreciate hearing from all of you. The best thing about doing this job is meeting many of you. I've got to meet many of you live, but also hearing the fun stuff you do with the stuff we make. Whether it's a custom computer build or mods you did, or it's a video game that you're just having a lot of fun in. Those are the things that make everything else we do worthwhile. And having a chance to reach out to somebody in the community that needs a little help, awesome. There we go. I miss making my Nitro 64 screen. What happened to it? That's not good. Why did you sell it? Vegas 64 is a rockin' card. Oh. Oh well. All right. We've got about 14 minutes of show left, guys. Come at me. Bring me some stuff. Is anybody up, Punk? Um and let me guess, the 1080 Ti died. Oh. Oh, that's terrible. That's luck. That's just awful luck. Um, yeah, that's terrible. My wife is still running a Vega 56, and is very happy with it. And she games at 1440p. She's been playing a lot of Watchdog Legions, and she's very happy with it. And she's running a 2600 for a CPU. So it shows you don't always need the biggest and baddest to enjoy the game very much. District, I'd love to hear your thoughts real quick if you want to type something in. Because I'd love to hear other people's thoughts of Cyberpunk. Everybody's given it a bad view on the PC, and I don't think that's fair. I'm finding the PC experience has been very solid. I'm getting great gameplay. I wish the storyline was a little more open, and I have publicly stated I would love to see them do a true sandbox version of the game where you don't have to play the primary storyline. You can just go out and be your character and Eddie's and everything else. I wish they would do that. I'm hoping they're going to expand it. They I really believe they're going to put the time and the effort into this. I really do. Hopefully, in the next few days, we're going to see the first big patch. Um, Visa, I understand that. Wanting to wait for the DLCs. The only reason I didn't was my wife pre-ordered it for me as an anniversary present. I'll make sure I said that right because a couple of times I've said birthday, but it was one of the two. And she pre-ordered it for me, so I got it through pre-order. Normally, I wouldn't have done that. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I got it. The game, you know what? For all the problems they have with the console, the game on the PC really isn't that bad. Yeah, there are some minor glitches. The driving mechanic, especially in first person, to me is atrocious. I can't stand the driving mechanics in first person, but the driving in third person isn't terrible. So, let me see here. The minor glitches can be kind of fun. They can be a lot of fun. But yeah, you have to be prepared to take that with a grain of salt. District says enjoying the game, bugs and all, performance is fine. Have noticed some systems that I think should have been in the game were cut. Yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen some stuff I'd like to see cut. I've only played 180 hours. Oh dear God, I thought at 60 that I was addicted. Oh dear God, I don't get time to game as much as I'd like to anymore. I got too many other things going on. So when I get a chance to game, I'm going to game. Um, I can't look at the YouTube video until I get out of this because it'll get recorded, and we don't want to do that. The They've got some real potential here to make a good long-term game. That I think is going to be the test. Where this game is in 6 months to a year is going to be a testament to how CD is going to do with this. If in 6 months to a year they've added some more content, they've got a real expansion system coming into place, they've got some good bug fixes, then that shows me they are who we've all thought they were. If 6 months to a year comes and we're still struggling with the same mess, yeah, then you got to back up and say maybe not. Um, Morally complex side quests, I like those. I've never had to reload a save for a bug. I've had to reload a save because I was stupid. I've got a mission right now I'm running. I'm basically running a Johnny Mnemonic style character, a net runner with pistol, and I've got this mission I'm running where everybody has the red skull over their head. But because I can hack them with the cameras from distance, I've managed to knock down about half of them. But if I ever let them start shooting at me, I'm dead so fast. And I've even got that nice sniper rifle. I'm just dead so fast. I like the feel. I wish they would flesh out the city a little more. The city feels a little sterile. And part of that is the NPCs. There's no real interaction on a regular basis. So other than that, I mean, I'm enjoying the gameplay. So let's see here. For those that want, there are some good mods on Nexus. Yes, there are. Nexus mods has some good mods. The vehicle handling is okay. I'm not a fan of the third person. The game was designed around the concept of being played in first person, and I like it better in first person. I tried third person, and with the exception of driving, I just don't find third person as fun. It's not like other games like, well, like Watchdog Legion, where it was designed from day one to be a third person game. The cover system doesn't exist like what exists in a proper third person game. Um, but yeah, yeah, I'm like you. I drive in third person, but I play in first person. I'm gonna find a way to go into the Voodoo Boy territory though and kill them all because I'm not going to give any spoilers. So, all right. Do we have anything else before we head out? Somebody posted in stream comments. Oh, Nitzer did. Nitzer, there's a channel right above us. You found it. That posted in the stream comments. The stream comments section was supposed to be about people that are doing live streams. That happens. Any thoughts on gaming ergonomics? Did you guys see the video that Gamers Nexus did about gaming chairs? Dude, I've been preaching that for 5 years. Gaming chairs suck. They are overpriced. They don't fit well. They're not comfortable. I've got a website I use that is custom office chairs, and they actually specialize in what's called a 24/7 chair. These are chairs that are designed for people like dispatchers and stuff, where there's always somebody sitting in them. And many of them, and you know what? I will Breaking Dimes. I'll post the site in general after the show. And great place. It's got chairs anywhere from 250 to 500 pounds in rating. And I buy my chairs from them. But one of the cool features they offer is there's certain models of the chair they will customize. So if you want your gamer tag on the back of the chair at the top, you can have that. You can even put a graphic. They embroider it into the chair material, and it's really inexpensive for them to do it. And to me, that's a much cooler look. I think it's cool if imagine you're watching me on a video, and on the top back of my chair, it doesn't say GT Racer, it says Sapphire Ed. I think that is awesome. And yeah, we got my wife got a DX Racer chair when they first came out. She's ready to throw it out the door. It's gradually fallen apart. And when we looked to get the replacement parts, the arm on one side fell off. And we looked, the arm itself was damaged. We contacted DX Racer, this is a few years back. We contacted DX Racer, and their response was, "Oh, we'll be happy to sell you an arm. It's $100. It's a flipping arm. It's an arm on the side of the chair. So my wife is now, she wants one of these regular office style chairs that are more comfortable. They're bigger. They've got a softer finish to them. That's my thought on gaming chairs. I'm not a huge fan of gaming chairs, and gaming desks. I'm in the same boat. Most desks I've noticed. You guys tell me if you've seen something different. Most computer desks are only about 24 inches deep, and to me, if it's less than 30, it's too small. I like some space on my desk. I like to be able to spread out on my desk a little bit. So what I ended up doing is I couldn't find a desk that was made the way I wanted, not at a reasonable price. So I found a local store that sells like cabinet tops and stuff, and they had some butcher block cabinet tops, and I bought an 8-foot by 32-inch butcher block for $200. And we got that, and then a good friend of mine does a lot of custom welding and stuff. So he used 1-inch square steel piping, built the frame, and then blued it so that it looks really nice. And that's my desk. My desk, myself and Doug, who between us, about 600 pounds. are dancing on top of this desk when we put it in, and it didn't move. The desk is massive. It's got tons of open space. It's built like a tank. It's made out of real wood that's like 2 inches thick, and it can take abuse. And the cool part was the total cost to build it was under $300. Now, does it look gamery? No, it does not. It looks nothing gamery, but it's going to last longer than I am. And if there's an earthquake or a tornado, hiding under my desk is the best place to hide. So there you go. All right. Time for one more question. One more question. Come on, guys. This isn't Ask Me Anything. You're going to get this last question, and then we're going to go. Here we go. We got somebody typing. Suspense is killing me. By the way, thank you guys. The activity in the community makes it a lot more fun. Is there going to be a giveaway? We just did that. We talked about it. Come on, give me a real question. Maybe next month we'll do another one. We'll see what we can do. I've got a few cards from reviewers that I can pull that are just sitting around right now. Maybe we can do that. See what we can do. One more question. Come on, give me a real question. That's okay. No worries, brother. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Let's find out. A 1, a 2, a 3, 3. And on that note, it's time for us to get out of here. Thank you guys for everybody for coming out and joining the community. Love you all. Appreciate you all. I hope that your new year is starting off great. If you got questions, comments, please feel free to post them constantly. We're always on Discord looking around. And I'll see you guys soon. Have a great day. Bye. 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 Bye.